Coming up, Dawn-Marie Hutchinson joins us for a discussion on rethinking your architectures. In our discussion segment, we talk about executive concern over security, your golden ticket to higher paying jobs, the death of best practices, and a bonus on some really bad advice. And that's just because we're looking out for you. The news this week, we got Apereo, Proofpoint, Wombat, Owl, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show about security startups, how to secure your startup, and advice for security startups. It's Business Security Weekly.
I need it from the top.
Brought to you by, do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending these assets? Have you penetration tested these public assets? Start 2018 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Business Security Weekly. It's episode number 73. We record this live, and on this program, we're exploring the business of security to better improve the security of business. So we're going to cover leadership, communication, innovation. Join us, map your path to success. I'm still Michael Santarcangelo, and today I'm in lovely and sunny Myrtle Beach, which means I'm actually barefoot right now. Joining me is my partner in crime, always attractive, Paul Asadorian. He's at G-Unit Studios. I'm guessing it's cold up there in Rhode Island, Paul?
Yes, currently it is cold up there.
And I'm not there to snuggle with you in
No,
studio,
you're not.
So.
And I was hoping to snuggle with a nice warm cup of coffee, except this coffee's something. It smells. It smells really heinous. This is an emergency. Like
it's been a tough week for you, Paul.
This is horrible. It just ruined my whole week. Coffee is very important to the production of the show. So we're going to work on that.
That's how we stay so perky, except for I don't drink it yet. All right, so let me tell you guys quick. Hack West 1.0, the Wild Bunch, scheduled for March 21st through the 23rd in lovely Salt Lake City. It's going to include training opportunities with Tim Tomes, Fuzzy Knopp, Jordan and Kent from Black Hills Information Security. And check out all these villages. You're going to have a wireless hacking village, a voting machine hacking village, a mobile device hacking village, and you get keynotes from Dawn-Marie Hutchinson, our guest here in a minute, and Eve Galperin. So go to hackwest.org to register, and as one of our audience members, you get 25% off if you use the discount code SWHW2018, so 2018.
I was supposed to be in attendance to that conference, and I'm excited about the number of villages rather, and I guess since I'm not going, that makes me the village idiot.
Yeah, well, it takes a village, right? Something like that. Somewhere around that. All right. Well, so with that sort of a lead-in and the brilliant start that we're off to, we're going to reach out to somebody with some more sensibilities here to see where we can go. But I'm excited. Dawn-Marie Hutchinson is joining us. She's at Optiv in the I don't remember anymore, Dawn-Marie, what you guys call it. It's the Office of the something to advise people, but she's smarter than obviously Paul and I combined. And actually, we're going to talk today a little bit about architectures and rethinking stuff. And, obviously on this program, we look at innovation. We love challenging dogma and looking at stuff differently. So Dawn-Marie, welcome to Business Security Weekly, and thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited about this. It's interesting you mentioned Hack West. Sean and I have been working together for about 18 months. So as soon as last year was over, he was like, can you do it next year? And so I'm really excited about going out.
Yeah, that'll be neat. That's a lot of excitement. All right, so let's talk about architectures. Because as we were getting ready for the show, you said, look, there's some stuff I could talk about, but where I'm really excited, so that's, of course, where we're going to focus, is on the way that we've done defense in depth for so many years. This year is maybe a chance to do it differently. So tell us about that. Tell us about how we've been doing it and where you see an opportunity for us to think about it differently.
Sure. So this all kind of came about when I started studying the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. And pretty much it just says you have to have a reasonable security program. And to us in the United States, it's really hard to understand what does that reasonable mean. If I ask my 12-year-old daughter to go clean her room, she's going to come back in 10 minutes and tell me it's clean, right?
Yeah.
But it's,
Yeah.
that really reasonableness comes down to who's judging. And so one of the ways we talk about who's judging is we're looking at your security stack and saying, what's there? And would everybody kind of, if you pulled 100 security nerds into a room, would we all argue that what you have there is reasonable? So when we started to think about it and we started to kind of catalog all of the technologies that most organizations have in place, what we're starting to find across my client base is we have lots left in our security infrastructure and the security stack from when we were doing defense in depth, right? We would build multiple layers of technologies across our organizations to say, well, geez, if this doesn't stop them, then this will, and then this will. But what we're finding now is a lot of those technologies haven't been updated. They're not patched. They're, years behind, and frankly, just sitting there now as a vulnerability. Some other reasons why we're looking back at that stack is a lot of the things we built and put in place are not working for cloud adoption or the insurgence of mobile technologies. Most organizations are saying, we want our employees to be able to work anywhere on anything at any time. So what that really means is we have to go back and look at the infrastructure and say, what's working for us and what's not. I was kind of saying to you earlier.
When you say that to people, how often, when you ask people that question, how often do you get a cogent answer versus a look of panic as a, what do you mean what's working, what's not working?
I think most people know what's working. I think their fear is, how do I get budget to take it out? I think there's a mismatch between management and security right now, because we would like to buy and implement new technologies, but that involves taking something else out. And oftentimes we have management looking at us like, but we just bought that. We spent however many $1 million on that. And they can understand sunk cost when we're talking about assets on the operations side or in supply chain. Sunk cost is a very common concept across business, except in IT, they, for whatever reason, don't adopt that sunk cost concept terribly well. So what we're finding is, one, do they know what's there? Oftentimes with the turnover in security officials, we're finding that they don't know what's in the stack. They don't know what they're using. I had one client tell me he had a particular proxy solution in place, only to find out that they were in place, but they weren't in line. So he had 3 boxes that were humming along and keeping the data center warm, but were actually serving no function. So, that's when I kind of started to think about this. We need to look at what we have, catalog it, and get rid of what we don't need anymore.
I love that. I talk to so many people who the way they explain it is, I have all these plates spinning in the air, and I feel like I have to keep them all spinning and spin up new plates. So how do we go about figuring out what we don't need anymore?
So my sister actually is an interior designer, and she owns Rethink Home Interiors. So she and I talk about this a lot. One of the things she does for her clients is she'll walk in and take everything out of the room, everything out. And she will only bring back the pieces that work for the way the family lives in the space. And, she might repurpose a couple items or refurbish them, fix them up, and bring them back in, and some other things they buy new. I'm just suggesting that as security pros, we obviously can't take everything out of the environment and put it back in. That doesn't work. But get a clean whiteboard and say, this is what our security stack looks like. What do we want in it? What's working for us? What works for our business? What needs to be upgraded, patched, cleaned up, and put back? What do we need to just throw out? And what do we need to buy new? And that's just a really good way to look at what do we have and what do we need, what's working and what's not, and help stay in lockstep with our business and where the business is going. If they're going to the cloud, you're going to need to revisit your identity and access management program. Because, historically we bought point solutions when identity was an IT problem. But now with mobility and cloud, it's a business problem, and we have to reinvent the way we do identity now. So that's one example of what comes out from this exercise.
I love the simplicity of it. How often do you find then that when you sit down to the whiteboard, the first go round is accurate, Right, because I always find it's kind of like, you mentioned 12-year-old kids. The way I always say it is that the way it is, or is that the way you'd like it to be? Which is a nice way to ask somebody if they're lying. But I think that because of so much dogma and so much inherited stuff, a lot of the teams I work with kind of think they know how it works, but they're not really sure. And the first time you sit in front of a whiteboard and sketch it out, sometimes I find that they're horrified because they've never looked at it that way. Do you have the same experience, or do you have some insights on how to make that a little easier for teams?
Yeah, so actually it's similar to policies, right? And you should be doing this exercise in concert with what policies do you have in place and what is the expertise of your team. And so I always say about policies, similar to your example, is this what you do, or is this aspirational? Because a lot of times we've pulled policies down off somebody's website and we've tried to implement it, but the business didn't buy in. So when I get in front of a whiteboard, often with teams, what happens is they start drawing me boxes of servers and they start putting, obscure server names and everything. And I'm a little bit like, that's not what I'm asking, right? We have to up level it, start talking about the program level. What are our foundational security pieces? What do they look like? How old are they? And start moving the conversation that way. I think I get a lot of aspirational conversation because my feeling is security officials or security teams in general feel very put upon. I think they're feeling under-respected in their teams. And so when I come in there from the office of the CISO, they're looking to impress me. And so oftentimes I have to go through the exercise of saying, all right, well, you say you have this. Have you tested the configuration? When was the last time you did a risk assessment on this segment or something to that effect? And that's when I hear things like, well, actually, we only have that for this business line. Well, okay, if it's not protecting critical business assets, do we know what the critical business assets are? It tends to drive an entirely different conversation because historically we look at the network as one kind of universe of space, and we try to put equal controls around everything or over everything, and it's ineffective. So what we really want to drive from this conversation is, what are your critical business assets? Where is your business going? And let's talk about what that security program is going to look like in terms of bringing, back into the environment, sort of a thing. When we look at the network as a whole and trying to put security controls over everything, lock everybody out sort of effort, what ends up happening is you've put 50 locks now on the door. And if you put 50 locks on the door, it's not a door anymore, right? You can't successfully or easily come and go from it. And so you've disabled the function of the door. We want to make sure when we're going through this exercise that when we talk about security tools, we're not disabling the functions of the business. And part of this exercise is understanding what assets make the business money, where do we need to make sure there's a little bit more flexibility, and where do we need to put the lion's share of our controls to make sure we're getting the most for our money for our value.
I think people get stuck in a rut, and you end up with a lot of legacy technology, and every environment is different. When I worked for a university, their IT systems had a lot of mileage on them, and you very often find a lot of disparate systems that have just been there since like the beginning of time. And if you turn something off, someone would scream. But, which I wish I knew back then, what I know now, if you approach them and say, well, I want to just replace, your technology, they would squawk and go, no, this is how we always did things. But if you approach it, how can I make your job better? Like, what are the problems you have with this older technology? They'd be like, yeah, you know what? It could be better. And I'd be like, well, I can help you with that and make it better. In making it better, we then make it more secure. We reduce the attack surface and update the architecture so that it fits with your whiteboarding sessions, that you're doing with folks as well. And that's not often I need to go buy a security tool. It's often just cleaning house. And inherently from that, we become more secure. Do you agree? Is that part of your strategy?
Yeah, and actually that's a really good conversation to have, because what we discovered when we started walking down the path with GDPR with our clients, so we start with data mapping and doing some data flow diagrams, because you have to, in GDPR, you have to validate the lawfulness of the collection of the data. So you've been given the data for a specific business purpose, and you can't use it for anything else. So when you go through the process of data mapping, what I'm finding is most of my clients have about 10% of their business processes or applications are collecting data that it doesn't use. The application doesn't need, the business person on the other side of the screen doesn't need. It's just the way they've always done it. So what I'm finding is, I keep saying we can spend $20 million to encrypt everything in your environment, or you can spend $100,000 and get a new API that provides you the same level of data input and interaction with an application and reduces your threat footprint. And a lot of companies are looking at some of these business processes and fixing them by rehabbing the technology, by changing what they've got, because this is the way we've always done it, is the most dangerous words in the world. But then also when you consider that shadow IT was born out of needs not being acknowledged by IT, right? That shadow IT is the business telling IT they're not giving me what I need, so I'm going to go get it myself. And so this facilitates conversation that lets IT know what the business needs and gives the expertise to fix it and give them something better, do better, and at the same time remove some legacy assets from the environment. Because I think no matter what organization I've been in, as soon as I go and tell them that they've got a system on their network that can't be patched because it's too old, they say, why? And I say, you've got an application sitting there that the business needs. And they go, well, why do they need it? Right. And so at the upper levels, they're going, well, just fix it and get rid of it. But at the lower levels, they're saying, this is my precious. Right. And so they need that application. But we can spin up, we can grow, we can build a new application, we can buy a new application that does the same things, provides the same level of flexibility that they need. They just don't know they can do that. And so part of this exercise is facilitating conversation around what can we get rid of and how can we help you? That's the taking things out that don't work for us anymore, or refurbishing things and bringing them back in.
I can imagine a lot of people listening to this right now are going, yeah. And then the minute you say, okay, so you've got to stop, slow down, pause long enough to sit and have this conversation. And I now see a lot of people going, oh, well, that sounds great. I wish we had time to do it. And I always look at it and I wonder, how can you not have time to do it? But Dawn-Marie, when you work with people on this, how do you help them understand this is so essential to their success that they can't afford not to budget the time to do this?
Well, I think that's a really interesting conversation, because I think people get bored at their jobs. They have their day-to-day functions that they do all the time, and that's boring. And then a new project comes around and exciting and new, and they want to do the project. But it's not the best use of them to do it that way. So using staff augmentation, using integrators, using consultants to help with those projects frees you up so that you really do have the time. I think, they always say if you've been caught and you've had a security incident, and they turn to you and they say, well, why didn't you implement the technology? The answer can't be, I didn't have time, I didn't have money, or it didn't work for the business, right? Like there's kind of three critical things that lawyers want to hear, and they don't want to hear you didn't have time. They don't want to hear you didn't have money, and they don't want to hear that you didn't want to, right? So you have to find the time, and the way you're going to find the time is making sure that you have the right people working on the right projects at the right time. So the use of integrators, consultants, and other kind of technical experts to do your project work will help put your people in positions to interface with the business, because we need the on-site resources. I need the client resources to be committed to working with the other internal business units, because me coming in from the outside, I can't possibly know the way your business runs the way you do. I can't possibly know the infrastructure the way you do. And I need that person to be leading the ship, not with their hands in the wiry bits trying to stand up a new server.
That's a great point. I mean, like, I like that. I think a lot of people, I think that resonates with them. How quickly do you tend to see they experience the benefits of this?
So there's kind of two things there, right? So the first is, when does the IT team experience the benefit? I think it's painful at first. And one of the reasons it's painful at first is a lot of the technology that we're looking at, a lot of the lift doesn't fall on the security team, and it falls on IT partners. And so I think there can be a lot of rub, a lot of grind going there, because they too have day jobs. So I think initially there's a lot of friction for activity like this, because everyone is going to tell you that whatever that tool, whatever that thing is they need, and it's critical to their business. And some of it just comes from a place of comfort. Some of it comes from a place of security. Like, no, you can't replace that tool because that's my tool. And if you replace that tool, you can replace me. Right. So I think there's some insecurity for folks when we start to talking about taking out technology. So making sure that everyone on your team is receiving the right amount of training to still feel useful and to still have a role, even though you're getting rid of some of these technologies. So I think that that's important. But to your point, I think we start to see efficiency really quickly, because when you start taking items out, you're going to reduce you're going to reduce the noise on your network. You're going to reduce the noise in your logs. So you're going to automatically start to see some efficiency come in. If you work with automation and orchestration tools, you're going to see some automatic improvements in the way they're receiving, sending, and communicating information. So reaping the benefits fairly quickly internally. As a business unit, though, to the business area, it's all going to be unseen to them. And that's a very difficult place to be for the security office, because we like to project metrics. We like to talk about the things we've done and how it's improved the business. Unfortunately, for some of this stuff, we're not going to see it. Instead, we're going to be able to say, well, we took a critical system off the network and we gave you this. And they're kind of going, well, we didn't want that. We had the old thing. So being able to communicate and get the business excited about what you're doing is going to be really, really important. Communicating the value of your security program through every project is more than just metrics. It comes down to telling the story of what you're doing. And hopefully you can use kind of some of my little stories here to help make that point at home.
I think Michael's going to completely disagree with you on that.
Yeah, as I'm sitting here taking notes. Well, it's interesting because you talk about your stories, and I got thinking about what happens when you can walk into a room and you take everything out, you put back in just the stuff that you need. The people who embrace minimalism, they find it's cheaper to maintain, it's easier to clean, they're healthier and happier in the space. And that's basically what you're talking about, right? It's a nice way to go in and envision what you need. It's a very practical way to get rid of the stuff that you don't and figure out how to tell the story better. But I got to think too, some of that benefit is less stuff to maintain, less alarms going off, less wasted time in places. If that doesn't make you feel better, then do it again. Get rid of more stuff, right?
Right. And kind of coming back to that, my original point was people feel bored in their jobs. They're doing the same things. You're giving them something new. You're invigorating them in doing some of these changes. I went to business school at St. Joseph's University, and we had a CEO come in and speak to us. And he said one of the things he does right away when he takes over is he has the entire building painted. He said nothing communicates change to people like the smell of fresh paint. And you think about that for a minute, you're like, you know what, that's kind of true. But if you've thought about how you've painted your house or something, or the feeling of your desk when you've just cleaned it, you're getting that same things are new, things are different, things are great. It's giving you a positive vibe. Whereas when things are cluttered, things are dirty, things are dark, you don't get that same positive vibe. So at risk of sounding just a little bit soft, don't forget there is some emotional value to cleaning house.
I would never call that soft. That's the quickest way to piss me off, is to call it soft skills. So I'm with you. This is great. And I love the approach. Paul's joke there was, it sounds like we've talked together for years. So I'm obviously a big fan of it. It's been great having you on the show. I think this gave people a lot of stuff to think about. Any parting thoughts? Obviously, they can check you out at Hack West 1.0. But where else can they find you or get more of your ideas?
So I am CISO_advantage on Twitter. I love the Twitters. I just adore my Twitter community. You can also find me at Optiv's Office of the CISO. So just to clarify what that is, we're a team of former chief security officers, and we work with our clients mostly just to hug it out. That's kind of my roughing joke, but being a chief security officer is a very difficult job. And if you have access to other people who have done it before and who have the perspectives of numbers of other clients, current clients, that they can help you figure out and solve some of your problems, then you should take advantage of that. So I've never worked with a smarter and more established team than Optiv's Office of the CISO. So reach out to your local Office of the CISO team. Be happy to help. Look at board decks. Am I saying the right things? Why am I not getting my message through to my boss? Those kinds of things. So happy to reach out, or happy to communicate. Anybody who wants to reach out. I'm also on LinkedIn, but you can just look me up by my name for that.
And CISO_advantage. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly and giving our leaders something to think about, or something, I guess I should say, to rethink. And with that, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and we're going to get Paul's insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. I know you're not going to want to miss it. We'll be right back.